it was I think it was 5 or 4 years ago, we started thinking of recreating Bo Peep, and that's Bo Peep, how we know her from the first movie, to figure out who Bo Peep was. We did what Valerie said, like watched every part of the first and the second movie, and also we pulled out from the archives the original drawings of Bo Peep and saw a lot of designs they couldn't really get working in the first one. Here's some original designs, and here's some screenshots of the first movie. It was kind of hard to model something nice and smooth and round back with the technique we had. So I looked at the original model, which we couldn't use. And it's not just because the technique is now way more advanced, it's because she was never meant to be a main character. So there was no time or budget really given to take a lot of time to figure things out in her rig or her model. So you maybe see that the eyes are not even round spheres, they were like flat, and her whole face was kind of like sometimes, I don't want to say unappealing from certain camera angle, but it was really hard to get round, smooth shapes. So back in the days, they sculpted her and scanned her, and I totally freaked out when I got the original sculpt brought to me from the archives. Here you see Galen, the person who actually made Bo Peep in the first one, scanning her. We also did a lot of research trips to figure out what a porcelain doll actually, or porcelain figurine actually is. We flew down to Burbank, where they showed us how to create collector's dolls, where we saw how the dresses got sewn and how prototypes got produced, the shapes of princess faces that a girl really wants to have in her bedroom. Or we saw how a face got painted, and we wanted to incorporate that in her design as well. How porcelain reacts when it's fired. I learned a lot that, for example, porcelain shrinks 15% when it's fired. So a lot of the harder edges and creases and details just melt away. They are melting into the shapes, and this is something we actually also incorporated in her design. So they are not hard edges. She has not deep nose holes or like a lot of details in her ears or in the face. Everybody went to garage sales or flea markets and brought stuff to us, to our offices. We found this shoe with a really interesting cracks, and it's in the shading here too, just to remind the audience she is porcelain and fragile. Another really exciting thing was to meet the voice, Annie Potts, and this gave Bo another layer too. I feel like her voice is super strong, and you think of this nice, cute, fragile toy with a strong voice that just added up another layer. Here are some designs of Daniela Strigileva, who was the character designer on Bo. And instead of having, we usually get we call it a model package, a front drawing and a side drawing, which I used to model a character. I just got these sketches, and that inspired me to start modeling the character. And here's the pose. It's her classic lamp pose on the left that I used to start with a model. And I want to show you how modeling on the computer actually looks like. So I love to start with the mouth and the eyes, because I feel like this is the most important thing on a human. And modeling on the computer, it's like modeling in clay, but instead of moving clay around, I'm moving points in space. And these points are connected with, we call it polygons, which gives the surface to our characters, and the surface will be textured by shading artists later. And usually we model a character symmetric, so it's easier to put a rig in. Rigging means I'm putting controls in and a digital skeleton that animation actually can move the character. And I will show some examples later. During that process, the designer gives me drawovers, so we are sitting together on the computer and figuring out what kind of shapes she actually will have in a movie. And here's some thoughts about her eyelashes and how they are melting in the porcelain burning process. This is the model that got approved from the director, and now I can start with putting a digital skeleton in. And even in that process, I'm still working close with the art together to figure out what kind of shapes are the cheeks making, how the cheeks are like growing when she's smiling, things like that. Here's a little example with an early animation test of her face. So here the rig is still pretty rough, but it's important to start early with animation so we can evaluate how much custom controls animators need. And this is just one example. For example, like some drawers over the mouth, we did the same thoughts. We put a ton of thoughts in her arms or in her other limbs, like in her body. How smooth is the body? How hard is the elbow? Here are some drawers. We really thought a lot about her shapes. And this is our in-house software and how animation can move the character when the skeleton is put in. Here is some bones. So, as I mentioned earlier, we got really early paired with an animator that tests the rig. And here's a really nice dancing scene just to test how everything is working. These are shots, they never show up in the movie. It's purely for testing the rig. And the next one I want to share is we had her wearing a collector's style dress, which also never shows up in the movie, but there was so much work, beautiful work put in that I want to share that with you. This was the idea of our classic bow, but she's changing a lot, and Carrie is now talking about that.
Espero estén disfrutando del making of de Toy Story 4 tanto como nosotros. Esperen más contenido en exclusiva para Alerta Atómica. Suscríbanse al canal y únanse a la rebelión.